In my mind, the blue economy is about managing for abundance, going back to a way of thinking which Indigenous people still have, which is that you don't take more than you need. You keep areas closed off, you allow the fish stocks to recover, you look after your big fat female fish.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the Blue Pioneers podcast. Today I'm with Belinda Bramley, who's a marine conservationist who, unlike many marine conservationists, came from a finance background. So we're going to explore some of the links between nature and nature conservation and the world of finance and the economy, and some of the links that might not be so obvious when we first think about it. Can you maybe just summarise, what does the ocean do for us? Why is it that it's not just a nice to have, but it's absolutely sort of critical to every other SDG and sort of life on this planet?
Yeah, and I've seen some interesting sort of depictions of the SDGs, and for me, SDG 14 and SDG 15, life below and life above water, underpin everything. To me, it's kind of incredibly obvious that nature allows us to have an existence here on this planet, and it provides essential life support systems. So the phytoplankton of the ocean provide every other breath of oxygen that we take. Phytoplankton in the ocean, which are the base of the food web, sequester as much carbon through that process as for Amazon rainforest's worth. And I think just even that elementary fact isn't well known.
So when we talk about phytoplankton, just to be clear, these are those sort of microscopic organisms that photosynthesize. So they're sort of similar to plants or analogous to plants.
Yes.
That live in the terrestrial environments, but at the base of the food chain.
Yes, exactly. This invisible green life force that floats along the top of the ocean and supports an incredible biomass volume of marine life that all relies on that phytoplankton doing their job at the surface waters, completely invisible to the human eye, and yet it's pumping half of the world's oxygen, or historic plankton has led to the oxygenation of our atmosphere, strictly speaking.
And when we, so your career path actually has taken you from accountancy and working in finance to working in finance for ocean conservation organisations. But now we sort of talk about almost the finance of the ocean. It's not just finance for the ocean, but the blue economy is actually sort of looking at can you explain for our viewers what do we mean by the blue economy? Because I think this is sort of one step further on from just finding ways to put money into the ocean.
In my mind, the blue economy is about managing for abundance, going back to a way of thinking which Indigenous people still have, which is that you don't take more than you need. You keep areas closed off, you allow the fish stocks to recover, you look after your big fat female fish, and you don't incidentally trash seabeds through your fishing methods or catch innocent species in the process of fishing. So I'm talking about fishing because fishing is the biggest driver of loss of marine life until now. And now we have climate change, which is adding new pressures to the ocean. So in my mind, it's regenerative, but it has to be inclusive and fairer, because a lot of big organisations and value chains exploit the bounty of the seas, often in a poorly regulated or managed fashion or in a illegal fashion. And small-scale fishers are too often marginalised and left behind. And yet they're the people who really depend on the ocean for their livelihoods. So in my mind, it's a fairer model of ocean governance and management. And finance is crucial because it's such a big engine of the economy, and it's our economy and our current models that are driving this overexploitation of nature on land and on sea. And so that's the engine, that's the engine room that we have to turn around. And so a big part of it is what you're doing is education, because I think the ocean is still out of sight and out of mind for many of us.
Have you seen any examples in recent years of where this is being done effectively, or where at least we're starting to see a sort of transition to a more regenerative relationship with the oceans? And what's been involved in bringing about that sort of change in terms of the types of stakeholders that are involved and the sort of behaviour change?
Yeah, it's encouraging. There are have been a lot of stated commitments to the sustainable ocean economy, and there is now a high-level panel for the sustainable ocean economy, which is, I think, around 18 world leaders, leaders of their countries that have committed to 100% sustainable management of their sea spaces by 2025. And that includes a number of very large ocean nations like Canada, for instance. I think the UK is in there, and but countries from every continent and every population dynamic, including small island nations. And I think they are collectively discovering what this actually looks like and means in practice. And some have started with achieving 30% protection of their marine area by 2030. Some have achieved that 10 years ahead of schedule. So the Seychelles, where I did some work, achieved 30% protected areas of, which is an area almost the size of Germany in terms of ocean area protected by 2020. And that was again down to the political leadership of the then president, working with donor countries and the TNC, the Nature Conservancy, to effect an economic transaction called a debt for nature swap for the ocean that allowed them to implement marine spatial planning and marine protections. So sometimes it starts with marine protections. Sometimes it might start with kind of restoration projects and stimulating new businesses. So you will know about that, Kat. There's a lot of scope for opportunity for innovation, technologies, restoration methods, restorative aquaculture to kind of revive the ocean, revive the health of the ocean where it has been has lost health. And then there are sort of the enabling conditions. There's the finance and the policies and getting those to act cohesively and coherently. And there's still a lot of work to do there, because I think that's where systems change can be really exciting, because we rely on governments to be able to do anything in the ocean space because waters belong in theory to the nation. So it's very hard, as you probably know, to actually get projects going on the ground.
I mean, that sort of systems change idea has come up a few times, and it feels like the crux actually of everything that across multiple conversations that we're having, it all comes back to systems change. How close do you think we are to actually being able to do this? And what are the missing pieces of the puzzle still?
Yeah, I think different countries are moving at different speeds. I'm always excited when I see progress from countries like Canada that are working with their indigenous communities, putting serious funding into their blue economy, putting serious stakeholder engagement processes in. This is several years ago now, into thinking about their blue economy. This high level panel is quite a good thing, because I think it then fosters a bit of a race to do the best in terms of ocean protection. But we also have to look at what they mean by ocean protection. There are these paper parks, so commitments, and national governments will report one thing, and if you look at the details of what's actually protected and what's off limits and what's enforced, it's completely different. So luckily we have these NGOs that are like Global Fishing Watch and Oceana and Greenpeace that continue to expose what the actual truth of the protection matter is. But I feel like the time is coming. I think increasingly the private sector, the finance sector, there are pioneers in those spaces that really see the risk, and the economic risk of to the financial industry of doing nothing is growing daily. And so I think there's a real appetite there, and I think the trick is to harness those pioneers in the private sector space to come on board, and then the governments will feel obliged. Then they'll be under real pressure, and they can't meet the 30 by 30 goal, for instance, on their own. That is just not going to happen. So I think that's where and NGOs can be part of that, but I think we have to join the dots and get outside our silos and look at what needs to be done in the cold light of day.
And so I've got three questions that we sort of asked to try to sum up. What's the sea change that you want to see for our oceans?
Yeah, I want to see much more ocean protection, and I want to see sustainable fishing, and then that could be transformative quickly. Ocean life rebounds quickly. So there are so many studies that have shown those benefits visually to us and economically to us. And so that's the sea change I want to see. And I think that it can be levered through those things that we've already discussed, Kat. It's about bringing different actors together rather than, and somebody has to do that. So we need these instigators.
And what's something that, this can sometimes feel quite far removed from people in their daily lives, especially when they don't live by the ocean, they don't see it every day. What's something that everybody can do to help drive this in the right direction, even if they're not sort of interacting with the ocean all the time?
Yeah, I just think it's quite useful to think about how you are impacting the ocean without consciously doing so. So, whether you eat fish, if you eat fish, for example, do you look out for the blue tick, or do you look at Marine Conservation Society's Good Fish Guide, which goes beyond the blue tick of the MCS to say, well, this I can eat because it's coming from a sustainable fishery. So just even understanding what you're eating is a good place to start if you happen to eat fish. I know a lot of companies and individuals might say, I've got nothing to do with the ocean, but are you buying goods that are shipped from somewhere else? 80% of goods are shipped at sea. And how well is your shipping company doing in terms of managing their ocean footprint? So I think if you start to think about it, there's plastic waste, and we could talk about that at length, and other forms of pollution. But so there's always something you can do, however modest. And I just think I think everybody has a responsibility, because no one person can turn things around. It takes a collective.
And very last question: what do you see going on that gives you hope these days that we can achieve the change we need to see for the ocean?
I see a lot more awareness in the UK, especially, Kat, about the plight of the marine environment. And I think plastics has done a lot to really help people realise the state of the ocean. And that's only, of course, one problem. We've got climate as a major problem now. And so the heat records are terrifying. For anybody who follows the science, as I'm sure you do, if you look at the compounding pressures on the ocean, it's really troubling. So I think there's heightened awareness in England and in Scotland. Surveys done by the national governments have found that 80% or more of the population are concerned about the state of the marine environment and want to see more marine protection. So I think that awareness, that sort of dynamism of young people that take matters into their own hands and will just go and do something, I think that gives me hope. And I think, again, the recognition in the private sector that nature is under real threat and that poses a huge risk to the economy is becoming much more apparent too. And then I think things can happen really quickly. So
nature can bounce back pretty fast, which is puts us in a good starting point to achieve something real. Belinda, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise and all of your thoughts with us. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you on our podcast. I hope you'll follow us on our expedition, and we'll be sharing the stories of lots of individual projects as we go around that are all helping to do their bit to achieve some of what you've been talking about. So hopefully that will help add to those messages that we can do this. Like you said, it's not too late, it's not too hard, it's actually not too expensive to turn this around, and it will have so many benefits for us all in terms of nature, climate, and actually our own economy as well. So thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you very much, Kat. It's been a great pleasure, and thank you for the work that you're doing to raise awareness going around the coast, and for all your own work professionally. And I hope you have a great time with the row.
Thank you.